There we go. All right. Slideshow. So this is our fourth of a 5-part series that with the help of many self-advocates and conversations over years of voting rights and what was needed in the field. And if you're not talking, I'm going to ask that you mute. Just that we're not fighting to be heard. And let's go ahead and get the play sound off. So over the years of working alongside self-advocates in voting rights, there's a few things that have stood out, and there was the top 5 that I heard over and over. My co-chair, Galen Tootle, who we will talk about quite often on this PowerPoint, on this conversation, and I've heard these top 5 quite often. And the fourth in our list is understanding the required accommodations at the polls. So let's talk about these. Oops, we do not want to skip over this. So this series and everything that RevUp does is in memory of Galen Tootle, a very powerful voting rights advocate who passed away. But in a video he left us, and thank you, Save My Vote, who captured his words before he passed, went home, said that he's not going to pass his torch, but he'll light ours. So part of his lighting our torch is to help us better understand the required accessibility at the polls. So thank you, Galen Tootle, and I still use present tense on my co-chair because he still have a chair right beside me at my desk that represents my co-chair, Galen Tootle. As a quick review, the importance of the disability vote: 7.8 million registered voters in Georgia, 650,000 people with disabilities in Georgia are of voting age. To include family and loved one allies, we can double and even triple that impact. So we are a powerful force in Georgia that can make a big difference in disability issues. The good news is, because of the work of RevUp and many on this call, we made a difference in the 2020 and election. The not so good news is people with disabilities are 5% less likely to vote. So what RevUp is asking is that we triple the disability vote. We triple the vote, which means that you learn about your the required accessibility at the polls, and then you tell 3 people, and you ask those three people to tell 3 people, and we keep this going to triple the disability vote. Going back to Poi Winnechuckle with this Southern Poverty Law Center, the vote and just wanted to give credit to the and here are some of the important issues on the screen: voting accessibility, healthcare access, ADA compliance, health issues, portability, Medicaid reimbursements to providers, rate of pay to direct support workforce, wait list for services, transportation, housing, employment. These are all the things that we know. Emergency preparedness, especially in this time with what recently hit us, economic security and social isolation. So that's the vote and. Vote for candidates who will work on your issues and concerns. We know that no candidate will be perfect. Every candidate will have to work with others to accomplish those policy changes. And stay tuned with Rev Up as we grow in the legislative session, because we will be talking about how candidates that we vote into the session will have to work across the aisle. And we're going to support them in doing that. So 3 previous presentations in this 5-part series, we've already talked about making my voting plan, finding my polling place, and understanding my ballot. Recently, Crimmins and Associate Rev Up, we've made on the screen, for those who can see the screen, there's these very graphic one-pagers that we've put together. There are 3 different ones. The first one is a front and back for making my voting plan. Unfortunately for Georgia, it takes a front and back. It's no longer just a one-pager front. So there's 3 ways to make the voting plan. We will be getting these one-pagers out very quickly. The second of these 3 is finding my polling place. That is a one-pager front only. And then the third of these one-pagers is understanding your ballot, and that will accompany a booklet that we created for the recent candidates form that has all the candidates in it, that you'll be able to take notes as you learn more about the candidates. And on the last page, yes, at the polling location, you can take your notes with you to your polling location. Yes, you can take your notes with you to the polling location. At the kiosk, you can have your notes. So a quick review of key points. Last day to apply for your absentee ballot this year under SB 202, the new voting laws. You have to apply for an absentee ballot. It's coming up quickly, October 28th. Early voting is October 17th to November 4th. Submit the absentee ballot October 7th through November 8th. And then our election day, the last day to vote, is November 8th. Those all have to tie into your voting plan. Voting in Georgia, first you'll need to make sure that your voting registration is up to date, and on the screen is my voter page. There's so many different websites you can go to check your to make sure your voting registration is up to date. I tend to keep going back to the Secretary of State's voting page just because of the legality of voting in Georgia now. I want us to stay on top of making sure we're within the law now in Georgia. So my voting page, mvp.sos.ga.gov/s/. Second, you'll need a form of voter identification, such as a government-issued driver's ID or identification card. On the screen is a snapshot, a screenshot of welcome to my voter page, and it's a list of 1 through 9 of the different things you can do on my voter page. Making your voting plan, again in review, there's A, B, or C. Thank you, Zan Thornton. A, absentee ballot after you have applied. B, early voting, sometimes it's called advanced voting. And then C, on election day. Where to vote, 1, 2, or 3. You can vote at a county drop box under the new law, SB 202. Every county has to have at least 1 county drop box, and they are located indoors and only accessible during office hours that location is open. Number 2, your county's early voting locations, and note the S on locations. You can vote at any of the early voting locations in in your county. And then number 3, excuse me, your assigned polling location on election day. Those can be found at my voting page that was earlier on the slide. All right, let's get down to what are, as my screen is losing charge. So your voting plan, you've decided your voting plan is vote early or on election day. So what are the required accommodations for voters with disabilities? On your screen is a graphic for those who can see the screen, welcoming voters with disabilities. Last year, RevUp worked with the Southeast ADA Center to create a poster. This can be just an 8.5 by 11, or it can be blown up to a poster for poll workers. And so what Dan Crimmins, my partner in crime with in good trouble with Crimmins and Associates, and I decided to do for this webinar is to do a part A and a part B. Part A is we're asking you to work with your poll workers, and we're going to tell you how to find those, to make sure they understand what your rights are as a voter with a disability. And we're going to give you, after this, we will send it out, this welcoming voters with disabilities. So the first part of this presentation is to support you talking with your poll worker. And then part 2 will be diving deep into some details about you as a person with a disability at the polls. So let's dissect a bit this graphic on the page for those who aren't seeing the graphic. Let's divide it up. Tips for the poll worker to make voting experience welcoming, fair, and accessible. Should have put fair in quotations, but that's for another advocacy day. The disability community is large, diverse, pays attention to a wide range of issues, represents all political ideas, and cares about policies that affect their everyday lives. People with disabilities have a right to vote. That's at the top of this graphic. They first talk about on this graphic directly to the poll worker outside the polling place. We teach the poll worker that there should be signs for parking, that accessibility starts outside the polling place, signs directing voters to accessible parking, that the parking should be right near an accessible entrance. So accessible parking near an accessible entrance. The pathways, there should be create a accessible pathway from the accessible parking. How many times can we say that in this one pager? To the polling place entrance, that the entrance door, that'll be on the next one. Make sure the polling place door can be easily opened. You know, some of those doors are so hard to open, although we're not making it a push button yet, again, for another advocacy day. If there are no designated accessible parking space, create a space by placing a sign there. Again, we're talking to the poll workers on these slides that there should be chairs and benches for those who have difficulty standing for long periods, provide clear accessible path. This is inside the polling location. Provide clear accessible path from registration to the registration table to the voting booth. And for those for sighted voters, provide written notice that assistance is available. Service animals. We touch on service animals because Galen and I and others in the RevUp Coalition have heard that people who come in with service animals have been escorted out. So we need to work together as a coalition to make sure that that never happens to a person with disability again. On the slide, service animals must be admitted to the voting location. Do not pet or distract a service animal. Again, this is directed to the poll worker. As they are working, they're a working animal, not a pet. If a disability is not obvious, poll workers may ask 2 questions. This was news to me. Is the animal required because of a disability? And the second question, the poll worker is instructed that they're able to ask, what is the animal trained to do for you? And then last, poll workers may not ask for documentation or ask the handler to demonstrate what the service, what service the animal performs. So all of this is on the one pager that you can take with you. One, we are calling you to action to go to work with the poll workers beforehand, and certainly with you when you go to vote. In-person voting assistance. You can get help voting if you were unable to sign your name, unable to see a ballot, operate voting equipment, or enter the voting booth without assistance. However, it is important as a voter with a disability that you understand when you arrive, you must give the poll worker the name of the person assisting you or write it on your voter certification. Some of the people who cannot help you, so most everybody can help you to vote if you choose, except your employer, an agent of your employer, an officer, an agent of a union, and then anybody related to a candidate. I'm just going to broad stroke that one. Assistance in interacting with the voters, going back to the poll worker. Written notice that an assistance is available must be posted. Again, we mentioned that for those voters who are sighted. A poll worker must offer assistance if the voter is unable to see or mark a ballot, operate the voting equipment, enter the voting booth without assistance. Again, the poll worker is instructed to offer the assistance, must offer the assistance. Lastly, if someone is blind or has low vision, the poll worker should identify themselves and offer assistance. Provide magnifying devices for those who request them. Recommend size for large print is 18-point sans serif font. Have a pad or a pad of paper and pen in case someone is deaf or unable to speak, and then provide private voting station with maximum height of 34 for wheelchair users and people who sit. There's a lot of advocacy to do, right? The last piece on this one pager that we're going to ask your call to action to work with your poll workers. Remember, on the golden rule, treat others as you'd like to be treated. Be courteous, considerate of extra time, be patient with the person, speak directly to the voter and not their companion. Always ask if the voter wants help before offering assistance. I think I might have mentioned that. All right. So let's do a little bit of a deep dive. I think I mentioned there was a part 1 where our call to action is for you to work with your poll worker. Part 2 is Dan and I did a study on the Secretary of State's site, voting assistance for people with disabilities. We wanted to see what they had to say specific to the topic. And before we look under that hood, I wanted to go back to my co-chair, Galen. Galen Toodles before he went home, passed on, his last voting, his last time voting was not accessible. It was truly the worst voting experience of his time with us. And what I don't want that to happen with us, because he had done everything perfectly. He had always worked with his board of elections. He knew them well. And he went and again, Save My Vote, thank you, have his testimony of his last time voting, that it didn't go well. So what I want us to do is to not be disappointed or have a difficult time. What we're asking you to do, Rev Up, is asking you to contact your Board of Elections in advance. And on the screen is the Secretary of State's website to contact your county elections office. It's elections.sos.ga.gov/elections/county-elections-office.do. Contact them in advance with this one pager about what poll workers are supposed to do to ensure that your voting experience is what is required. You may also contact the Secretary of State's office at 404-656-2871. So don't wait to be disappointed. Be proactive. As Galen would say, don't pass the torch, light the next torch. So we're asking you to not only do this contact, but ask 3 others to contact. So on the screen is, again, the screenshot of the Secretary of State's voting assistance for people with disabilities. I always want to give those who are able to see the screen a shot of what we're talking about. And this is the voting assistance for people with disabilities, so you know where I'm getting this information. And then the website is at the Secretary of State's sos.ga.gov/pag/voting voting assistance-people-disabilities. And you can go to that website and be right where I am. Voting assistance for people with disabilities, there is a way, and again, in our 30-minute video, we don't have time to deep dive into this, but where I am, Rev Up would love to come back and deep dive into the audio mode, and there's a tactile mode on these voting machines. I think that we could talk with the Georgia Advocacy Office into doing a separate workshop on the voting machines and the accessibility. I would love to see those be in person at the different locations that we would want for the community connectors to set up these voting machines so we could practice once again. There have been several headsets for those who need these the ballots read to you, and then there's these also large controls that are available for people with limited mobility. There has to be at least one, again, deep breath, one touchscreen voting machines that allow people to sit or use a wheelchair. Advocacy Day noted. People who are visually impaired. If you are visually impaired or blind, because we know that there's a range of when people are blind, you can use an app on your phone to read your ballot to you before you cast it. I'm going to say that again. You can use an app on your phone to read your ballot before you cast it. That is on the Secretary of State's website. Before you leave the polling place, you are required to delete the photos of your ballot necessary to read it. So you can use your phone at the polling place to read your ballot. You just have to delete those photos before you leave. Again, reference to the Secretary of State's website. Yes, under the law of SB 202. There's no waiting in line on election day from the times of 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Any voter who is 75 years of age or older, or who is disabled and requires assistance voting, may immediately go to the next available voting compartment or booth without having to wait in line. I think that also needs an advocacy day, that we need to extend that to early voting and all from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. But that's for another time. The tactile mode, there is a, I'm looking at our time, there is a screen for the tactile mode, and it goes into a little bit more detail that was on the Secretary of State's page. It's called ATI, and it's a handheld device that is used for a voter during accessible voting session to navigate through to make selections to use their ballot. And again, I would love to talk with the Georgia Advocacy Office to do a whole workshop on these different modes on Georgia's booths. We can report accessibility issues, and on my is again, it goes back to the voting assistance people with disabilities website, and on the far right it says more resource, and it's a box that I have highlighted, report accessibility issues. You just need to fill in your first name, your last name, all your contact information, phone number, mailing address, city, state, zip, email, select your county, enter your question or comment under 300 words, and then attach any attachments, meaning photos. Click I'm not a robot and then hit submit. What I do want to note, this is also the form that is filled out if you're reporting suspicion of voter fraud. I want to let you know that it is that same form that we will talk about in our next time together when we're trouble at the polls. On the screen is, oops, let me go back. Power the Disability. There's the webinar series evaluation. I'm going to send this out as the follow-up when I send these one-pagers. It's less than a 1-minute survey, and we really need to know how we're doing. What we do know is there's 30 minutes or less, sometimes they go a little over, webinars, so we can't give you all. We're trying to summarize and give you quick little snippets to start the conversation, not to, as my daddy would say in the South, boil the ocean. So please keep that in mind when you fill out the survey. But we'll send you this this link so that you can help us if we're giving you the summary information that you need. But wait, there's more. This was number 4 of the 5-part series. Next will be, as I've already given you a hint, getting help if I have trouble at the polls. So when you're at the polls, we're going to talk about that Thursday, October 27th, again at 10 a.m. I've got the registration link that will be coming to you on the next. Special appreciation and thanks to the Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities for funding this webinar series and so much of the work, one of Rev Up and then Crimmins and Associates. Georgia Advocacy Office for funding sign language interpretation, and Sign One News for all that they do for the disability community. So my name is Stacy Ramirez. My email address is sramirez@crimmins, CRIMMINZ.com. And my partner in good trouble is Dr. Daniel Crimmins. And we are partners in Crimmins and Associates. So I thank you so much for being on. I know we're a little over. I am going to stop sharing and check the chat quickly. I have to put on my glasses. Oh, there's been a lot. Oh, we'll go back. Nice PowerPoint. Thank you, Zan. Yes, and thank you, Zan, for the ABC and the 1, 2, 3. All right. If there are questions, again, I do realize we're over a little bit. I'd love to open it up. Otherwise, I will certainly get you the one-pagers that I had sent. I will send the outline of the PowerPoint to those who request it so that it's not all graphic. You can see the screen readers would be able to read out the words that were on the screen. And have a great day. Be sure to, oh, we do have a hand. Stancil Toodle, welcome to the room.
Good morning. And it's not this, it is in reference to what you had said earlier about the use of screen readers when reading one's ballot. Could you clarify what they mean by casting? Does that mean when I cast my ballot on the machine, or does casting mean when I, after printing out the paper and dropping it in the scanner? Which one does that refer to? The reason being is because if I'm using the accessible machine, it will read the ballot, so I really wouldn't need to use a app. Then I would need to use the app after printing out my ballot before placing it in the scanner.
And that is great information to have, especially from you, Toodle. What I was sharing is that if you choose to use your phone for accessibility, you can. What you just gave us is that you don't have to, that there is an option on the machine that will allow you to see, and I'm using air quotes, to see your ballot. And again, I would love to do what, go ahead.
But after printing it out, and when you get up from, well, when you leave the accessible machine, you have the printed ballot in your hand, which you have to go over and put in the scanner. And that's where that's where accessibility the barrier would come in to play. So going back to the question from what you read from the Secretary of State's website, do they clarify what they, at what point are we talking about casting? Are we talking about casting my ballot on the machine, or are we talking about putting my printed ballot into the scanner?
I hear it as an and myself, because I have heard from sighted voters that they have reviewed their screen and hit print and looked down at what was printed, and it was not what, for whatever reason, I am not a conspiracy theorist at all, evidently they didn't catch something on the screen, and once they printed it, it was not what who they wanted to vote for. So that I'm coming to you saying, and use the accessibility of the machine, print, and then use the accessibility of your phone to do a double check to make sure on the screen is what you voted for, and then what was printed was, yes, indeed, what you want scanned in to cast your ballot. Did that make sense?
Yeah, but I think we need to ask them for some clarity, because in the previous election, that was what I got harassed about, was using my iPhone to check the printed ballot before putting it into the scanner. And I
And
was told you can't do that. So we need to get some clarity.
And Stancil Tootle, you are the very reason why I read that slide 3 times, because those poll workers were not educated, right? So
Oh,
let's
oh,
not be disappointed. Let's step in front of this, contact your polling location ahead of time, and get with that poll manager. If you are a voter with a disability, we are going to advocate in advance and be sure that our needs are met. Yes, Darian Todd.
Hi. I guess I have one question when it comes to voting and also are people with disabilities voting. I heard you mention um in your
In the
in your
opening.
in your PowerPoint that they have these machines that print for you and also read what's on your ballot and all that. So my question, that's great to that, but my question is, how would they how would they disperse who needs to um use that um
The
machine,
machine.
because a lot of people, when they want to use a certain machine like that, they're like, okay, well, the people that really need to use it are people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. When you have someone that is perfectly fine with writing and understanding what is going on their paper, how would they distribute that out to who really needs to use those machines when it comes to
Yeah,
the the ballot and going to your post to vote?
that is a great question, Darian. And an advocacy issue that we need to address in the upcoming legislative session. There's a few advocates that have already had discussion about possible legislation on voting rights for people with disabilities. What has happened in the past is some of the accessible tools, I'll use the word tools, that we can use as disability voters, that we have to wait. And even Galen in his the video that he shared of his last voting experience was having to wait. He could have either waited for the accessible voting machine or just gone ahead and voted. So the waiting for the accessible tools is an issue that when you look at the numbers that I led, Dr. Daniel Crimmins gave us the statistics on that first slide. When you look at the numbers of the constituency of people with disabilities in Georgia that are of voting age, we should not have to wait. That each of the polling places should be equipped to support us as the civil right of people with disabilities to vote. So we'll need your voice to help us with that. But to answer your question point blank is this year if you choose to use the tools and someone else is using them, you will have to wait in your polling place till that's finished. I'm sorry to say, for this year. You hear
Thank you.
me. You hear
Yes.
me. Oh. All right. Okay, without any more questions, I greatly appreciate everybody being on. This is, every time I do these webinars, I keep learning more and learning more, and that is specific. So I can go out and teach 3 others. I might have mentioned that. And as I'm teaching 3 others, I'm asking you to teach 3 others and 3 others so that we can do this vote tripling and educate people with disabilities to get out that vote. So have a great day, and vote and in the great wisdom of Hoy Winnechuckle, that we want to vote, but understand that there's a platform that we're voting for, and understand why you're voting. So have a great one.
Stacy,
Oh, yes.
I apologize. I'm not great at Zoom yet and didn't know how to raise my hand, but
Oh,
can I get the screen reader accessible text from the PowerPoint sent to my email? I put it in the chat, I think.
yes, you may. You may.
Okay, thanks so
Certainly.
much.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you for letting me know too. Advocacy, self-advocacy. I appreciate you all. All right.
Yep.
Hi, Derek Hurd,
Hey.
advocate extraordinaire. I'm so proud. I almost want to take a screenshot. I have Darian Todd and Derek Hurd on the screen at the same time. I'm flush. Great to have you, sir.
Yep.
All righty. So I've got to get busy putting some things together and get back out to you guys. I'm going to take a quick screenshot of who all was on to make sure that at least you get those that were on, get it first. And we will go teach others, right? All right. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you very much. Bye, Derek.